going to move now into Washington Irving's writing. We have Washington Irving, April 3rd, 1783 to November 28th, 1859. What's important about his dates? Well, he's actually born after the American Revolution. Thought that might be an important benchmark to consider. Irving's background. All right, well, Irving, he was conscious about national identity very much. Some fun stuff here, too. And Rip Van Winkle, Rip, well, the name Rip is a pun. Rest in peace, right? And Winkle, 40 winks, old slang for a nap. He captures with Rip's sleep a transitional moment in America. Now, you also might know Irving from The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Washington Irving was very much in love with the old world. He was enamored of the old world, Europe. And he went in search of finding a way to give America some sort of a past in his writing. That's where he actually overlaps nicely with the romantic imagery in Frenau. And Irving traveled in Europe, and he actually was exposed to a lot of European folk tales that he was inspired by and used in his writing. In fact, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow and Rip Van Winkle are his two most American stories. The others you may not even be able to recognize as American literature if you ever read them. And if you're interested, they're in a collection called The Sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon. I'll talk more about that in a minute. Washington Irving was named for George Washington. So even in his name there, we have the American Revolution signified, and he was one of the first American writers in the post-revolutionary era to gain an international reputation. Many U.S. readers admired Irving for his ability to get a good critical reception in England because most American authors were seen as inferior. He even gets actually roundly criticized for being so in love with England and Europe. Later authors trash him for it. You'll see that even in this class. Irving is known for using atmospherics in his writing. They're low on plot. He really goes instead to focus on small details and build up the atmosphere. He focuses on images and the effect of the short story, much like Poe later on in our American Lit timeline, and he emphasizes the imagination. Here we have Rip Van Winkle entering his house, depicted in the image here. There are so many Rip Van Winkle images if you look online. Rip Van Winkle is particularly interesting for its narrative arrangement, and I want to give some trivia on this slide too. It has a really complex narrative arrangement. The narrator is a guy named Peter Vanderdonk, who is supposedly a descendant of the historian of that name. And Peter indicates that the Rip Van Winkle story was found among the papers of the late Deirdre Knickerbocker. All right, here comes your trivia. The New York Knickerbockers, the Knicks, that's where their name comes from Washington Irving. Okay, but wait, there's more. So their narrator is Peter Vanderdonk, but he said he found the Rip Van Winkle story in the papers of Deirdre Knickerbocker. And this is all in a collection by Washington Irving that he published under the pseudonym of Geoffrey Crayon. Good Lord. It's like little nesting Russian dolls with the narrative levels here and the frame tale. A frame tale is like a picture frame around a story. It's like a setup. Irving, he wanted to be like Sir Walter Scott, English author. He wanted to make money from publishing, but kind of a sad bit about him here. There were no copyright laws in the US at the time. American entrepreneurs in England were taking copies over and reproducing them. Authors weren't receiving royalties and didn't until after 1856 with the universal copyright law. All right, let's dig more into Rip Van Winkle. I thought this was funny. I found this liquor. I was looking for Rip Van Winkle images, and I thought I'm going to put that up there because we do have the bit where he gets drunk, right? In Rip Van Winkle, we have fairy tale sounds and imagery, magic and fantasy, ambiguity. What's going on? Is it real? Is it magic? Transformation with Rip's sleep and awakening. We have some humor at last in this class, right? We have the importance of George III in the portrait at the end, later signified by General Washington, and maybe even the first American dream. The Rip Van Winkle character is a comic hero and also an innocent. He's not industrious, he doesn't work hard, but he's lovable. So he's kind of a mix of this sort of supposed to be a Ben Franklin ideal, but we don't really hate him for not working too hard because we do love the guy. He hibernates and awakens, symbolic of America at the time. He has a metamorphosis when he comes back from his sleep. It's a funny little scene. The role of his wife, well, that's an important one. She's a shrew. And you could do a lot with the depiction of her in this story and some of the problems with that. He's a hard worker, but just not for his wife. I want to get back to this idea of transformation. I have it there in all caps for a reason, and ambiguity. So, ambiguity, you can't quite tell what's going on. He's in some kind of weird space outdoors. He gets drunk with some mythical figures that are like old Dutch men or something. He's in this space where he can transform, and his feelings or consciousness can be altered. But it's important to note that that space has to be one in which he's overwhelmed by the sublime of the space, like the awe-inspiring nature, or a space in which, at the least, the quotidian becomes the unusual. Quotidian is a fancy way of saying daily life. Daily life is made strange if you get into certain spaces, and you can have relationship with other realities. I think it's worth noting, we might even say there's some Gothic in Rip Van Winkle. And if you want to take a deep dive into some connections and folklore, the idea of the sleeping hero in folktales and European traditions, the sleeping king or hero who disappears into sleep, is common in mythology. And we could even think about heroes that go into some sort of supernatural realm and return after some time has passed. Even Han Solo does this in The Empire Strikes Back, and Captain America does too. This is a famous painting by John Quidor, painted in 1839. This is called Rip Van Winkle and his companions at the inn door of Nicholas Vedder. And here we have, before the famous sleep, Rip over here leaning on the tree with his gun. These people are drinking. Ladies even passed out in the background. This dude's taking a big old draft from his mug. A romantic stylized image, looking very old world, not looking super American compared to other imagery that we see from the time. Here's Rip after Rip coming back. Oh, check this out. There's American flag. There's the George Washington up here. If we go back one, George III. The two different Georges, right? And this one's painted in 1849. I'm going to close Rip Van Winkle with that slide, and I'm going to go to part 4. And once again, thanks for watching.